There's a very specific kind of silence that happens when someone disappears into their own mind. You're in the shower, and somewhere between washing your hair and staring blankly at the wall, you've already rehearsed an entire argument with someone who doesn't even know they hurt you. Maybe you're driving home from work, replaying a conversation from 3 weeks ago, finally saying the perfect thing you wish you had said in the moment. In your head, the timing is flawless. Everyone understands you. Everything lands exactly the way it was supposed to. Then reality pulls you back. A car horn, a phone notification, the realization that you've been physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely. And if this feels strangely familiar, you are far from alone. Most people assume this is just ordinary daydreaming, but for some individuals, it becomes much deeper than that. It stops feeling like a passing habit and starts feeling like a second world they quietly live inside. Psychology has a name for this pattern: maladaptive daydreaming. It describes a state where imagined conversations, fantasy scenarios, and internal narratives become emotionally immersive enough to compete with real life itself. Not because someone is lazy or disconnected from reality, but because the mind discovered something important inside those imagined spaces: relief. Neurologically, this experience is connected to something called the default mode network. This network activates when your attention drifts away from the outside world. It begins generating memories, imagined futures, emotional simulations, and unfinished conversations. In most people, this system switches on temporarily, but for others, it becomes the brain's preferred setting. The inner world starts feeling more emotionally rewarding than the external one. And once that shift happens, reality can begin to feel strangely flat. Real conversations become unpredictable. Real relationships feel emotionally risky. Meanwhile, imagined scenarios offer control. You can replay them endlessly. You can rewrite them. You can finally say what you never got to say. That is why people who imagine fake scenarios are often not escaping reality in the shallow way others assume. They're usually trying to create emotional resolution their real life never fully gave them. Research into maladaptive daydreaming found that many people spend hours inside detailed internal worlds with recurring characters, emotional storylines, and imagined versions of connection. These fantasies often provide something psychologically missing in reality: safety, validation, certainty, or understanding. In a strange way, the imagined world becomes emotionally safer than the real one, and that is where the pattern slowly becomes dangerous. Because over time, the brain begins learning that emotional needs can be satisfied internally. Real life starts feeling heavier by comparison. Real people disappoint you. Real intimacy moves slowly and comes with uncertainty. But imagined scenarios can always be controlled. So the mind keeps returning there. Interestingly, this pattern is not necessarily linked to intelligence or creativity alone. Some highly creative people never experience it, while others who live very ordinary lives struggle with it every single day. What psychologists have found instead is a connection to something called absorption, the ability to become deeply immersed emotionally and mentally. These are often people who feel everything intensely. They get emotionally attached to music. Films stay with them for days. Conversations replay endlessly in their minds, long after everyone else has forgotten them. They are emotionally porous people, living in an emotionally overstimulating world. So eventually the mind builds a private room where emotions can exist safely. But there's another side to this that people rarely talk about: the shame cycle. Because somewhere underneath the imagined conversations and fantasy scenarios, there's usually an awareness that time is passing. You know the real world kept moving while you disappeared into your head for another hour. And when you finally return to reality, there's often a strange emotional heaviness waiting for you. Not guilt exactly. Something quieter. A feeling that your real life is happening somewhere outside your reach. And the painful part is that shame often feeds the habit even more. The more disconnected someone feels from reality, the more comforting the inner world becomes. The deeper the escape becomes, the harder real life starts to feel. But none of this means something is wrong with you. In fact, many people who develop this pattern did so because, at some point in life, their inner world became the safest place available to them. Maybe they grew up emotionally isolated. Maybe they never felt fully understood. Maybe they were too sensitive for environments that demanded emotional numbness. So the imagination adapted quietly. The daydream itself was never the true problem. It was the solution. The real question is whether that solution is still helping you now, or whether it has slowly started replacing the life you actually want to live. Because the goal is not to destroy your imagination. That would make no psychological sense at all. The ability to create emotionally rich inner worlds is not weakness. In many ways, it is evidence of deep emotional intelligence and powerful internal awareness. The goal is simply to understand what your mind has been trying to give you all this time. What emotional need are those imaginary conversations fulfilling? What connection are you rehearsing internally that you struggle to ask for in real life? What version of yourself only feels safe inside your own mind? People who experience this deeply often carry enormous emotional richness that has never fully found a place in the real world. The tragedy is not that they imagined too much. It's that somewhere along the way, they learned their depth only felt safe when nobody else could see it. And if you recognize yourself in any part of this, take a breath for a moment and remember something important. You do not need to hate yourself for adapting quietly. Your mind was trying to protect you in the only way it knew how.